Hi, first of all, we would like to thank the Beef Cattle Research Council and the Canadian Cattlemen Association for this opportunity to present part of the results from the National Beef Quality Satisfaction Survey. Before we talk about the study, we should have some background regarding what we understand as beef tenderness. From a consumer perspective, texture remains the most important aspect of eating quality of beef in North America. However, for several reasons, beef is not always as tender as consumers would like. Therefore, the challenge for the beef industry is still to provide a consistent and enjoyable eating experience. Being able to deliver consistently tender beef is beneficial for the industry as a whole, as it impacts profitability. But it can even become a marketing tool, as several studies and market experiences have proven that consumers are willing to pay more for guaranteed tender beef. But beef tenderness is a very complex trait, influenced by structural characteristics of the muscle and by multiple interactions between pre- and post-mortem factors. This means that controlling or modifying beef texture is not an easy task, as numerous parameters need to be considered from the farm to the fork. Thus, for example, the type of muscle fibers, the enzymatic activity of the amount and form of water in the muscle can affect tenderness. Also, the intramuscular fat and amount of connective tissue have a large influence on beef texture. There are important differences between muscle as a functional tissue in the live animal and the final meat that is consumed. These include the onset of rigor mortis and the proteolytic postmortem processes. The conversion of muscle to meat can be a lengthy process, requiring up to 48 hours or more in beef cattle. These processes are highly influenced by temperature and the method used for hanging the carcass, which interact with the pH decline and influence the degree of muscle shortening. But the ultimate meat tenderness is highly dependent on the degree of alteration and weakening of muscle structures, explaining the increase in tenderness in aged meat compared to unaged meat. The action of enzymatic systems are responsible for the improvement in tenderness after the aging period, mainly in muscles with low content in connective tissue, such as the ribeye. However, aging is not as effective in muscles with higher content in connective tissue, such as the inside and outside round. The characteristics of the muscle and its post-slaughter metabolism are highly influenced by pre- and post-slaughter factors. The main pre-slaughter factors are the species, genetics, production systems, and stress. As the influence of Cebu or Bos indicus increases, tenderness decreases. Within the traditional beef species, there is a large variation due to genetics. This opens the possibility of selection for beef tenderness. However, the relative contribution of the genotype to the final variation in tenderness needs to be put in context with the rest of pre- and post-slaughter factors. Recent studies seem to indicate that other factors, such as the use of implants, carcass suspension, or electrical stimulation, and mainly the aging period and cooking method, contribute to the final variation in beef tenderness in a much larger proportion than the genotype. As animal age increases, meat tenderness decreases, mostly due to the increase in total collagen and decrease in soluble collagen. However, this process is influenced by several factors that interact with the chronological age of the animal. Depending on the breed, diet, gender, exercise, or production system, animals show different rates of growth, and therefore similar ages can actually reflect different maturity stages. Thus, the use of growth promotants modifies the physiological maturity of the animal and may lead to tougher meat. The diet can also affect the amount and composition of intramuscular fat, which may have an impact on tenderness. Finally, pre-slaughter stress, due mainly to mixing, transportation, and environmental conditions, leads to changes in the muscle metabolism and a greater incidence of carcass defects such as PSC or DFD, also known as dark cutting. After the slaughter, multiple factors can influence beef tenderness. Traditionally, carcasses are suspended by the Achilles tendon during postmortem chilling, but various methods of altering carcass suspension have been attempted. Suspension by the pelvic or H-bone, also called tender stretch and tender cut, has been reported as the most effective in improving tenderness. Carcass size and degree of fatness are other factors that influence carcass temperature decline. Delayed chilling has been demonstrated to decrease toughness in beef. However, the risk of microbial proliferation makes this method unsuitable for commercial purposes. So, slower chilling procedures have been developed to reduce carcass temperature in 36-48 hour cycles instead of the traditional 24-hour cycle. Originally developed to prevent cold shortening, electrical stimulation has been a commercially successful mechanism for improving beef tenderness. Larger carcasses with high degree of fatness and therefore less affected by cold shortening will benefit less from this method. Dry aging is a traditional method of aging beef which involves direct exposure to airflow and humidity in a cooler for a variable number of days, followed by trimming of spoiled or oxidized meat prior to cooking. Different approaches have been attempted to make beef more tender. These include infusion of substances into the carcass immediately after slaughter, blade and needle tenderization, marination, the use of proteolytic enzymes, or high pressure processing. Meat cookery affects the texture and juiciness of beef. Changes in endpoint temperature, rate of heat transfer, and method of cooking have a direct impact on beef tenderness. Beef cooked to a rare endpoint, around 63 degrees Celsius, tends to be more tender and juicy than meat cooked to a well-done endpoint at 71 degrees. In fact, the degree of doneness has a greater effect on instrumental tenderness than marbling levels. National beef tenderness surveys are regularly conducted in several countries in order to compile baseline information on the tenderness of beef in the retail case and food service facilities. The results from these surveys reflect over time trends and help to identify potential issues to be solved in the future. In Canada, although several studies have reported some reference values for commercial beef texture, current and historical information regarding beef tenderness is limited. In fact, industry is usually working with values from very old studies, which show values for more than 25% of meat. At the beginning of the 1990s, following a research design, consumer thresholds and preliminary information was obtained from meat collected at commercial plants. However, these old studies use different methodologies to those used in other countries. Thus, there is considerable merit in updating these values using similar methodologies and thresholds as our competitors to ensure an equal playing field. The present study was designed by the collaborators of the Canadian Cattlemen Association AFC Partnership in order to collect Canadian retail beef from 4 large urban populations across the country and during 2 different years, 2001 and 2011, to study the evolution of retail beef tenderness values during the last decade. In both years, a private contractor sampled 4 Canadian cities: Calgary, Alberta, London, Ontario, Montreal, Quebec, and Toronto, Ontario. In each city, 3 or 4 retail chains, representing at least 1/3 of total market share in their area, were sampled for product in 1 to 8 stores per chain. Steaks were removed from store packaging, repackaged and identified individually, frozen immediately and shipped by the private contractor to the AFC Lacombe Research Center. Steaks were then stored frozen for approximately 2 months prior to being analyzed in order to standardize the storage period. In 2001, a total of 702 steaks for objective analysis, 175 cross ribs, 176 inside round, 176 top sirloin, and 175 strip loins were collected across Canada for the beef satisfaction survey. In 2011, a total of 602 steaks, 150 cross rib, 152 inside rounds, 150 top sirloins, and 150 strip loins were collected. Steak depth and weight and fat depth were measured for each steak. Cook time and cook weight were measured and cook loss was then calculated. Beef texture is a very complex attribute, and numerous objective and subjective methods have been developed to evaluate texture in both raw and cooked meat. For the objective evaluation of beef tenderness in the National Beef Satisfaction Survey, the standard methodology Warner-Brasler shear force analysis was chosen. This methodology needs a strict control of storage time, cooking parameters, and core shape and size. Storage needs to be controlled to avoid variations due to different sampling times. If meat is refrigerated, the aging process continues improving tenderness over time. Freezing can also damage muscle cells, leading to changes in heat transfer during cooking and potential variations in beef tenderness. Thus, when possible, measuring tenderness in fresh meat is the best option. However, in this type of studies, this is not possible. So the second best option is to standardize the length of the freezing period. That's why in this study, our results show that a 2-month freezing period was the best alternative, and that's how the procedure was done. Before cooking, steaks were thawed overnight in a cooler at 1 degree Celsius, and the cooking method and the parameters used to prepare the meat were also standardized using a grill preheated to approximately 210 degrees, and then the steaks were grilled to an internal temperature of 35 degrees Celsius, turned and cooked to a final temperature of 71, and this was controlled by spare point temperature probes connected to a computer with specific software. Obviously, the size of the course measured from each steak is going to influence the absolute value from the texture analysis. In the US, scientists have traditionally used cylindrical cores of 1.27 centimeters of diameter. Using this core size at the beginning of the 1990s, US scientists developed a consumer threshold system with 3 tenderness categories. In some cases, for application in industry, the classes within this system have been interpreted as need for tenderness enhancement, and then the 3 classes would be significant need, slight to moderate need, and no need for tenderness enhancement. On the other hand, Canadian scientists have traditionally used larger cylindrical cores with a diameter of 1.9 centimeters. The system was developed with a greater confidence value than the system from the US and includes 4 categories: tender, probably tough, and tough. For the National Beef Satisfaction Survey, 1.27 centimeter cores were utilized and the values were transformed to 1.9 core values in order to calculate both US and Canadian consumer thresholds. As a first set of data from the survey, let's take a look to a simple comparison of the basic traits of beef steaks collected during 2001 and 2011. The values indicate several interesting differences between the meat available at the retail stores today and a decade ago. The steak depth of strip loins, top sirloins, and cross ribs was lower in 2011. The weight of top sirloin, cross rib, and inside round steaks also decreased between 2001 and 2011, although only a trend was observed for the strip loin. As the use of thermometers during cooking by consumers is limited, there is an opportunity for overcooking of thin steaks, which may lead to tougher meat and increased dissatisfaction. It is unknown if the significant decrease in steak depth has been done to limit portion size. However, this is potentially a worrisome trend. Strip loins, top sirloins, and cross ribs also show greater fat thickness. Modifications in the animal population, such as an increase in the influence of British breeds, or production systems, such as the use of growth promotants, could be responsible for an increase in fat depth or cook loss. However, changes in carcass processing, such as chilling rates and primal preparation in the processing plants, such as fat trimming, could modify these and other traits. Regardless, the rest of the parameters, cook loss values were always higher in 2011 compared to 2001. When shear force values from 702 steaks collected in 4 different Canadian cities during 2001 were classified using the original US threshold values, the percentage of cross rib steaks classified as tender was 65%, with 13% being classified as tough or needing significant tenderness enhancement. In 2011, the percentage of tender cross rib steaks increased up to 76%, with only 8% needing significant tenderness enhancement. 27% of the inside round steaks evaluated in 2001 needed significant tenderness enhancement, and only 52% were classified as tender or not needing any tenderness enhancement. A slight improvement was observed in 2011, with 61% of the steaks classified as tender and only 13% needing significant tenderness enhancement. The proportion of top sirloin steaks classified as tough in 2001 was lower, with only 8% needing significant tenderness enhancement. 10 years later, that percentage slightly decreased, but the main change was observed in the proportion of tender steaks, passing from 70 to 86% of the analyzed steaks due to the decrease in top sirloins needing a slight to moderate tenderness enhancement. Finally, in 2001, most strip loins, 89%, were classified as tender or no need for tenderness enhancement. Tenderness was slightly to moderately needed for 6% of the strip loin steaks, and only 5% needed significant intervention. The contemporary US beef survey reported similar results to those measured in Canada. After a decade, the improvement in beef tenderness is evident. Shear force values show a significant reduction of the samples with any need for tenderness enhancement. Thus, in 2011, only 1% of the analyzed strip loins were classified as requiring a slight to moderate tenderness enhancement, and 99% of the steaks were classified as tender or not needing any tenderness enhancement. From the US Beef Tenderness Survey, published in 2007, a new category for very tender beef was included for beef with Warner Brothers shear force values under 3.2 kilograms. In that same US study, 100% of the ribeyes, top loins, and sirloins analyzed would have been classified as no need for tenderness enhancement. However, we must keep in mind that the thawing and cooking conditions were different to those utilized in Canada. Therefore, even using similar methodologies, the results are not 100% comparable. These same results, classified using the Canadian 4-category system, show a more detailed picture. The cross rib and inside round steaks that were classified as tough or probably tough were around 40 and 50% respectively. Strip loins and top sirloins classified as tender or probably tender were still more than 80 and 60% respectively. However, around 5 and 10% of the strip loins and top sirloins respectively were classified as tough. Moreover, the maximum percentage of steak classified as tender with an interval confidence of 80% was under 45% in the most tender cut, strip loin, and under 30% in the rest of steak types. These 2001 results represented a great potential for improvement, especially for those cuts which demonstrated an ability to be tender through a high percentage of probably tender steaks. As observed using the US threshold system, important changes in the distribution of the different categories were also observed for the Canadian thresholds in 2011. Thus, none of the strip loins was classified as tough, and only 3% were classified as probably tough. Moreover, the percentage of samples within the tender class increased up to 78%. The percentage of tough and probably tough top sirloins also decreased, 15 and 8% respectively, and the percentage of tender increased from 26% in 2001 to 37% in 2011. Interestingly, the significant changes observed in the strip loin and top sirloins were not as clearly reflected in cross rib and inside round, as also observed comparing US thresholds. Both the cross rib and inside round show significant decrease in the percentage of tough and roughly an overall 10% increase in the percentage of muscles classified as either tender or probably tender. Connective tissue content is muscle cut and age dependent, although there may be genetic factors controlling the rate of collagen cross-linking as an animal ages. In a recent study comparing the most influential factors regarding beef tenderness in Canadian beef, it was demonstrated that postmortem factors such as aging time can contribute a larger proportion to the final texture of meat than any pre-mortem factor. However, several postmortem factors such as carcass chilling and carcass suspension or electrical stimulation may have a larger influence on certain muscles, such as the loin and leg muscles, than in muscles from the front quarters of the carcass. The Canadian population of commercial cattle has shifted to include a greater proportion of British influence over the past 10-15 years, since marbling was reintroduced into the Canadian grading system in the 1990s. Higher fat levels can affect the rate of chilling and the conformation of the carcass on the hook. These factors may partly explain the greater increase in tenderness in some cuts included in the satisfaction survey. Also, aging time has been shown to contribute a larger proportion to the increase in tenderness of muscles with a low content in collagen. Significant modifications of tenderness in muscles with high collagen content through pre-mortem strategies are limited by the functional role of collagen in the live muscle. Post-mortem manipulation may be required to increase consumer satisfaction regarding these higher collagen cuts. However, it should be noticed that between 50 and 70% of the muscles evaluated for cross rib and inside round were already considered tender or probably tender. Hence, they should be considered as an opportunity for improvement instead of a negative issue. It is well known that a correct aging program leads to more consistently tender beef, regardless the use of different genetics, growth implants, or diets and production systems. However, this does not mean that pre-mortem factors should be ignored. In fact, the improvement observed in beef tenderness in Canada during the last 10 years may be a combination of animal selection, rational use of growth promotants, control of age at slaughter, appropriate carcass processing, and optimization of aging periods, as well as the interaction between all these factors. For instance, the increase in the influence of British breeds has led to fatter carcasses, which chill slower, decreasing core shortening and increasing tenderness. From the results obtained in this study, it can be concluded that tenderness of Canadian retail beef has significantly improved during the last decade. Changes in the animal population, production systems, and carcass processing have led to values in the strip loin close to 100% consumer satisfaction. The decrease in the percentages of tough and probably tough top sirloins was significant, but the improvement was lower than that observed for strip loin steaks. The improvement in tenderness values for cross rib and inside round steaks was more limited, either using US or Canadian thresholds. A higher content of collagen may be responsible for these differences. New technologies are available for online monitoring of beef tenderness. Implementing these technologies in abattoirs and or processing plants could help to identify the low percentage of steaks out of the acceptable limits of tenderness so that appropriate correction measures can be used. With the introduction of individual animal identification, the introduction of BICS, the Beef Information Exchange System, and the continued development of online technologies for estimating quality, the Canadian industry is poised to be able to maximize its understanding of the true commercial influence of various factors on end product quality. However, due to the large changes in tenderness that can occur as a result of appropriate aging, tenderness should not be used as a payment penalty back to producers. Finally, it is clear that parameters such as sampling timing, freezing time, or core size need to be standardized in order to be able to compare results over time. There could be value in recording a detailed fixed methodology for subsequent retail audits to follow, as well as deciding future survey dates in advance to optimize the process. So the message we would like you to take home from this presentation is that changes implemented by the industry during the last 10 years have resulted in more consistently tender beef in Canadian retail stores. And maintaining and improving those practices will lead to a high level of consumer satisfaction. That wraps up our research findings for Lacombe. For further information, please feel free to contact any of us. Thanks again for providing us this opportunity to share this work with our audience today.